And so we begin. Chapter 1, The Queen Gets Her Color. If she didn't already have it. I was drifting in warm darkness, wrapped in silence and unable to move. Somewhere nearby, whispers blossomed, slithering through the velvet shadows. There were echoes of footsteps in some wide, empty place. I could just make out the words that floated to me, the beginnings of understanding sparking at the back of my mind. My eyes flew open, and I was staring at a white ceiling whose features were still blurred by the haze of sleep. One hand reached up, rubbing my fingertips against my eyelids. The blurriness increased for a moment before the room around me came into focus. I let out an involuntary moan as I struggled to a sitting position. It was a hospital room. There was the soft hum of medical equipment and nothing else. I was dreaming just now, wasn't I? About what, I wasn't sure. The details slipped further away the more I tried to focus on them. Within seconds, the dream was beyond recall, leaving nothing but vague disquiet behind. Ugh. I rubbed my head and looked around again, blinking a few times. My eyes are weird. I scrubbed at them with the palms of my hands, then stared down at my fingers. No. Was the problem with my eyes? Or was it more that the problem was with my head? I clenched my fists and sighed. Everything feels different. I feel different. Swallowing against the dryness in my mouth, I finally reached for the water pitcher on the table next to the bed. My hands were shaking, something I didn't notice until I poured myself a cup. For the time being, I focused on drinking without spilling everything down the front of my gown. The water soothed my throat and washed away the gross taste in my mouth. Why does my mouth always taste like old moss in the mornings? Though, was it really even morning? I had no idea. My net access was non-existent, so I couldn't tell how long I'd been out. And I was alone as well. No nurses. Or anyone. I swung my legs over the edge of the bed and stood carefully, though I had a feeling I shouldn't be doing it. But I wanted answers. Solaris. I was fairly sure that's where I was. I vaguely remembered being at the cafe with Jack the day of my attempted kidnapping. Ari and Caleb showed up, because I let them. Not that I could have stopped them. Rather, I simply chose not to warn Jack they were coming. I wasn't even sure how I knew they were going to be arriving. I wonder what happened to Jack anyway. My memories from what happened after Ari teleported me out of the building were fuzzy at best, but I think they had been planning to let Jack go. That was the feeling I'd gotten from that woman in the alley. Vanessa? I think that's what Ari had called her anyway. And she was a bishop. I hadn't realized it at the time, but they'd all been in those familiar black and white uniforms, hadn't they? I wonder when Ari and Caleb even had time to change. You know, that's a good point. Not that it mattered. The point is that they would have taken me to Solaris after that. That was the Endgame headquarters, after all. My room didn't have a window, so I couldn't see outside to confirm it, though. That being the case, I made my way to the door with cautious steps, hoping my wobbly legs didn't give out. The door wasn't locked, and when I peeked my head out, there was no one nearby. The lack of guards surprised me, but in the end, I wasn't a prisoner here. I hoped. No one noticed me peering out, so I stepped into the hall and let the door slide shut behind me. Even then, no one paid attention to my presence. I just flattened myself against the wall and watched the various staff members pass by. There was a nurse's station not far away, but even the person there didn't seem to notice my presence. Keeping an eye on the nearby nurse, I edged down the hall, mostly to test if someone would stop me. And no one did. Are you doing that, like, bending reality thing that Ari's doing? By accident? Not when I'd gone 2 meters, not when I'd gone 6 meters, and not when I finally reached the door that led out of the medical ward. Curious, but with only the briefest hesitation, I looked over my shoulder once before I stepped into the corridor beyond. There was no one nearby for the time being, so I kept moving forward, one cautious step at a time. I half expected a group of white-clad agents to appear from thin air and tackle me, but no one did, of course. The place was massive. Or at least it felt massive, anyway. And there I was, wandering in the corridor in my thin pajama-like outfit dwarfed by the scale of it all. There were days I had the same feeling during my studies, feeling so small against the vastness of the history I wanted to explore. This was a little different. It was more uncomfortable and somehow more humbling. I shouldn't even be here. I was too small, too insignificant for all the fuss created for my sake. Eventually, I found myself wandering into what appeared to be some kind of lounge with a galley to one side. There were a few people dotted around, sitting at tables, chatting or eating. I still went unnoticed by everyone, and I decided they were just used to hospital escapees or something. Because I didn't know how else to explain no one even looking up as I entered. That aside, the long window on the far side of the room beckoned, and I made my way there, leaning against the half-wall to stare at the sprawling complex below. Core Solaris. Endgame's Ivory Tower. The headquarters located in the city-state of Brazil. I'd seen images of it, but none of them compared to the real thing. It was so familiar, so much like New Albion, and also very different. What happens now? Did this mean everything I'd worked for was gone? What was really in store for me here? I couldn't even begin to guess. I don't know how long I stood there, feeling lost and sorry for myself, before a commotion in the hall caught my attention. No one else moved to check it out, though the noise did turn a few heads. Another indication people here were just used to strange things going on, I suppose. Curious, I made my way back to peer into the corridor. Hello! An unexpectedly familiar person was right there. So close, I nearly buried my nose in his chest, in fact. I let out a cry and staggered back. He reached for me and... we're not emotional, so I guess I'm gonna stay where I am. I was frozen in place as he grabbed me by my shoulders. I expected to be yelled at or worse, but he just let out a long, frustrated sigh. I found myself staring at the top of his head as he lowered it to... maybe breathe a sigh of relief? But he was glaring at me again a few seconds later. Well, you have tried to escape multiple times, so he's probably just like, okay, thank goodness she's here.
What are you doing here? Do you have any idea what kind of uproar the medical ward is in right now?
No?
If you keep this up, they're going to restrain you, you know.
Keep what up? I left my room and no one paid attention to me, so I decided to take a look around.
No one paid attention to you. You walked all the way to the lounge and no one paid attention at all.
I mean, if they did, I wouldn't have made it down here, would I? He frowned, then shook his head and sighed again.
You're going back to your room. Come on.
He took me by the upper arm and started to lead me back towards the medical ward. Unknown woman.
Oi! Stop manhandling the new girl, Kale!
He's already like eye-rolling, like, oh boy. Behind us, two familiar people had just rounded a corner. Ari, and the woman I vaguely remembered from the alley that night at the cafe.
I'm not manhandling anyone, Vaughn. I'm escorting her back to her room. She kinda looks like she doesn't want to be escorted. Then you argue with that bastard in medical about why she's out here instead of in bed.
And he's already rolling it. Man, it's been like 8 minutes and he's already rolling his eyes like crazy. Caleb, this is chapter 1. Restrain yourself.
Ah, that bastard. Could you be referring to me by any chance, Caleb? Though I recall having asked you to refer to me as Dr. Sosky when I'm on duty.
I love that. He's like, you may call me that bastard when I'm off duty, but on duty, please, if you could use my title.
I suspect we may need to order another brain scan if you've already forgotten, given it was only yesterday. Memory troubles may be indicative of many serious medical conditions.
Caleb let out a frustrated groan.
Ugh, Sosky, it's not the time. And I was bringing her back to your damn medical ward so you can get off my case. I'm curious how exactly she got out of my medical ward again in the first place. Though I'm relieved it didn't involve her tearing through the halls after knocking someone half unconscious again.
I did what now?
You don't remember that? Oh man, Maggie is never going to let you hear the end of breaking his glasses.
Maggie?
The head of the Esper division of Endgame, King-ranked Esper, Magnus Ulrich.
I broke Magnus Ulrich's glasses? That was not a sentence I'd ever imagine myself saying.
You awakened rather abruptly 2 days ago and panicked. In the resulting chaos, you attempted to escape.
After breaking the head of Endgame's glasses. Oh my god.
It was annoying as hell, but I won't lie. It was also satisfying to see that asshole take an elbow to the head. Be that as it may, this is your second time disrupting my infirmary, Morgan Leone. I do hope you don't make a habit of it.
Okay, so this only happened twice this time around. Good to know.
I think we should be more concerned with the fact she made it this far without being noticed. You may be an idiot, but your staff is hardly incompetent. She shouldn't have been able to walk out that easily.
Well, I did think it was weird that no one seemed to notice me.
Wait, what? Oh?
I don't know. When I left my room, no one noticed. No one even looked at me, really.
That can't be correct. Your current room is right near the nurse station. Surely...
He paused thoughtfully. Though he was looking my way, his eyes had gone far away as he mulled over what I said.
No. If someone had noticed, we wouldn't be having the discussion. Though it makes no sense for her to go unnoticed. We had a watch on her room, so her waking up should have triggered an alert straight away.
He looked at me over the top of his display again, then fished a small handheld device from his pocket. A scanner, if I was to assume from the way he captured my chin, forcing me to stop walking long enough for him to place it to my temple.
Doctor? Quiet, Ariel. I'm merely taking a surface reading of her psi waves.
Seconds later, he was frowning down at it, placing a finger to his lips.
I see.
He looked up at me again, studying my face.
I had assumed the mild tachycardia and temporary dyspnea were due to physical exertion. It is possible, however, you have exacerbated your psi fatigue again. Though I suspect you weren't intentionally using psi due to your own apparent confusion over the situation. Doctor, are you suggesting, perhaps, that Morgan was mimicking my distortion ability?
I knew it.
Correct. Purely unintentionally. How fascinating. To copy such a high-level skill. But then she did witness it previously, didn't she? Even so, as an F-class skill, it should be more difficult to mimic, and yet the psi waves are clearly... Sasuke, stop talking to yourself.
So I was... distorting space?
More or less. You've witnessed this skill twice in encounters with me.
You mean that thing from... when you... you know...
Kidnapped you? Apprehended. And that ability is how we managed to go unnoticed when we grabbed you off the street.
Ah, I was wondering about that. Somehow talking about my abduction with one of the culprits was just a touch more awkward than I was capable of coping with at the moment. So I was relieved when the subject shifted back to the ability I'd apparently mimicked. We also started walking again, or more like I was herded back towards the infirmary, hemmed in as though they thought I'd try to run.
Ari's an F-class knight, and that distortion technique is unique to him, by the way. That's why I use all the flutter about your being able to copy it. A flutter is a poetic way to describe curiosity, but I suppose it's apt. Mimicking Ariel's skills is quite impressive, to be certain. But given we already had to repair brain damage from the psi fatigue you inflicted on yourself, I am not pleased to learn that you are still unconsciously using psi. I thought we had finally moved past that stage. Can't be helped. Not since finding out inhibitors don't seem to work on her.
Inhibitors? Wait, just how long have I been unconscious?
4 days if you don't count the day you woke up and tried to escape. Your Psi was very unstable during that period, and you managed to destroy some medical equipment, and your previous room. And that was in addition to the horde of glass jars you threw at us after barricading yourself in an empty room when your escape attempt failed.
Oops.
Attempts to suppress your Psi were unsuccessful. Most unusual. We have yet to analyze your Psi fully, but I suspect something about the wave oscillation is at odds with our suppression technology. We have yet to be able to adjust our equipment to match your wavelength. I'm pleased you've regained consciousness, but I want you back in your room. We'll need to run a deeper scan to ensure your current use of Psi has not undone any of the repairs I meticulously implemented 3 days ago. I would order you to cease all use of Psi for the time being, but such an order is pointless for something that continues to be unconscious. I would prefer it if we didn't have to induce another coma.
A coma? Another coma? I really missed a lot, didn't I?
Keeping you in a state of deep unconsciousness was the only effective way of putting a halt to your Psi output. It was, as is obvious, temporary, and it's hardly a non-standard medical procedure. It's not without its risks and complications, but your brain needed time to heal. The damage to your frontal lobe alone is not something any of us wants to hear about in great detail at this time.
He paused in front of the door to my room, giving me a long look.
For now, I'll stay and keep an eye on her.
That really isn't necessary.
I wasn't asking your permission. I, too, would prefer to have someone keeping watch for the time being. It seems your situation wasn't as stable as we assumed. And if you are going to mimic anyone, a rook would be the least damaging target.
Fantastic. And before I could protest further, I was ushered back to my room, back to bed, and had all my vitals checked. And had a sedative administered. And was lectured. Again. Eventually, I was lying on my bed, starting to doze off to the sound of medical equipment. Caleb and I were finally alone after Vaughn and Ari had been shooed away and all the nurses finally cleared out. He was seated next to me, legs stretched out and arms crossed over his chest. From the expression on his face, I thought he was probably reading on the net or something. At any rate, he wasn't paying attention to me. I'm deep in thought. You can actually see a brief outline of what he's reading. That's pretty cool. I watched him through half-closed eyes, my vision already going fuzzy with sleep again. Caleb reached up absently to catch a lock of hair that had fallen in his eyes. He twisted the strands between his thumb and forefingers, mouth turning downward as if he had seen something displeasing. I turned my head towards the ceiling as my eyelids grew heavier by the second. I had so much to ask. Questions. My words were slightly slurred. Caleb looked at me, eyebrow raised.
You'll have time to ask questions later. Don't think about complicated things right now. Just get some rest.
I want to know what happens to me now. A long pause.
You already know the answer to that one, Leone.
His voice was soft, strangely hesitant. I want to go home.
I know that already.
The odd catch in his voice made me want to look at him, but my eyes drooped shut and I let out a soft breath, unable to ward off sleep any longer. Aw, poor Caleb. Briefly, something warm and gentle settled on my forehead. I thought it was someone's hand and wondered if the doctor had come back to check on me. Something tells me it wasn't the doctor. And then I was out completely.